The ML Sports Platter is back with you, brought to you by Stanley Law Offices and our good friends over at RV Source of Central New York. If you're in and around the area, make sure you buy, sell, rent, service, and more from RV Source of Central New York. What a treat it is to bring in a legend of the game of baseball. It's Art Shamsky from the Miracle Mets. He's got a brand new book out right now for you Met fans, baseball and sports fans. It's called Met Stories I Tell My Friends. You can get it on all the major book platforms, Amazon.com, etc. Art Shamsky joins us now. Art, such a treat. I know I see you in Cooperstown every year. How are you?
I'm good, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
So what was the kind of, the idea behind this book? How did it all kind of come to fruition, and why did you release the ones that I guess you want to tell your friends? It almost kind of sounds like a water cooler, chat with your buddies or a couple of big pints by the bar stools here, right?
Yeah, well, this is my third book. I'm not going to be a novelist, and I'm not going to write love stories. I've written 3 books now, and basically all have been about the Mets in 1969. My first book, The Magnificent Season, is really about 1969 when the Jets won, we won, and the Knicks won in May of '70.
Crazy.
And it was really about the 3 teams and what was going on in the country and the city at the time, and really kind of a book on history. And my second book was the 50th anniversary of the '69 team, called After the Miracle, and that was a 50-year anniversary of talking about the friendships and the camaraderie that we have with that team, and partly because of how bad we were the year before. I wasn't there in the early years, but as everybody knows, the Mets historically were an awful team up till 1969, and really talking about the friendship and that developed and stayed with us all those years. And then this book was just really I was trying to figure out what I wanted to write about, and so many books have been written about that 1969 team. I think more books have been written about that team than any sports team in history. And I was just thinking about what I could write about. And I saw and looked at a book that Dwight Eisenhower, former President Eisenhower, wrote called At Ease, Stories I Only Tell My Friends. And I said, well, there's things I can expand on that have been told before, but also talk about some things that haven't been told before. And it's really a book about some fun things, some things that I did on a personal level with teammates and my roommate Kenny Boswell. And it really kind of is a book. It's not a book that's going to nail anybody for anything bad they did. It's more about talking about what we did, and just to break up the boredom sometimes of being on the road, et cetera, et cetera. And I think
Well, one thing that's amazing to me is when franchises don't win a million titles like the Yankees or the Celtics or the Canadians or UCLA through the years, whether it's in college or the professional ranks, but you get that 69 Mets, 86 Mets, 94 Rangers. It seems like they almost count double, triple because of how much it means at the time. And then as the years go on, there's more books, more conversations. It becomes almost mythical when you don't win again for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Do you feel that way about the 69 Mets, that even more than then when you won today, they haven't won since 86. Before that, it was 69. Do you feel that way? Like the 69 Mets, it almost counts more than just one World Series because of how special and mythical it was.
You're absolutely right, Mike. And what I really believe there's 2 teams in the history of the game, and I know that I sound a little prejudiced, but I think there's 2 teams that resonate with fans years after they won. The first one is the 27 Yankees, who had Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig and all those great stars. And it'll be 100 years in 2 years for that team, and people still talk about it and what how important they were to the game of baseball.
By
And
the way, it feels like 100
Mets,
years since they've won, by the way.
yeah, exactly. And for us now, it's what, 55 years, 56 years. And what's happened, though, because of how we won, where we came from, and the time, what was going on in the city of New York and the world, in the country, we were upside down in the world at that time. Like in the world, it's upside down now, but the war in Vietnam was tearing the country up. The city of New York was going under in so many ways, financially, morally, socially, spiritually. And we made people feel better about their lives at that time. And what they've done is they've passed that on from generation to generation. And I meet a lot of young people who weren't even born who know about that team from their parents and their grandparents. And I think it's just going to be passed on from generation to generation. And it just has a legacy. It just has a special meaning to people. I do a lot of speaking engagements and a lot of personal appearances. And I meet people who were in their 70s and even 80s. And I bring them back to their youth in a way, because they like talking about that. When they they took their kids to the games, and when they were kids to the games, and for a period of time they're back in their youth, and it makes me feel young too. And so I see it, and it's hard to explain. I just understand that that team was very special. The cast of characters who made it up, and unfortunately we've lost a lot of the guys from that team, but their history and that team just passes on from generation to generation. And I know what you're saying. It's just one of these teams that kind of is people's minds, and I see it all the time whenever I go out and speak.
Yeah, it resonates. It's all there. I mean, everywhere I go, it's, you'll walk along Main Street and I see some folks, you'll just hear somebody say, to their son or to whoever, like, the 69 Mets. And they just stop and they kind of freeze in time. There's 69 Mets, the 69 Mets. And so I love that response that you had. We're here with the Miracle Met himself, Art Shamsky. The brand new book is out. You can get it at artshamsky.com or Amazon. Your nearby bookstores, of course, as well. It's called Met Stories I Tell My Friends. I got a couple more for you here, Art, brought to you by Stanley Law Offices. This is kind of a two-part question. When did you realize you had something brewing at a championship level in '69? And you were such a great postseason clutch guy. I mean, you loved the moment, the stage, the lights, New York, when it mattered the most. Tie those two things in when you felt, oh, we got something brewing, and then you're at bat, and no moment seemed too big. You seemed to thrive when you guys got to the big moment.
Well, we still were not a great team going into August of 1969. We were 9 games behind the Cubs. That was the first year of division play. And all of a sudden, something clicked. Gil Hodges, of course, was a great manager. And when he came over in '68, my first year, along with some of the other guys, he just emphasized that you guys got to find ways to win. Yeah. You know how to lose games. We knew how to lose games. We were losing 100 every year. But he was a special manager, and just instilled in us a way to find ways to win. And of course, we had great pitching with Tom Seaver and Kuzman and McGraw and Nolan Ryan, and good defense. And it was just a matter of it all falling into place. And I think the real legacy of that team, Mike, is that when you talk about that team, it's just not about Tom Seaver and Cleon Jones and Cook, all the guys that we know the names of, but it's about Kenny Boswell and Bud Harrelson and Ed Charles and Wayne Garrick and Don Clendenin and and Ed Kranepool and Jerry Grody. I mean, I can go down the list of all the names, but I think people remember everybody because at some point during the season, everybody contributed to the success of that team. And for me, on a personal level, I had a great playoffs. That was the first year of the playoffs, and we beat Atlanta in 3 games. I had 7 for 13, I believe, in the playoffs. And Gil was getting the most out of everybody. He was platooning in 5 positions, and I think really, I think that for me, being able to be part of that, and I tell people my life changed October 16th, 1969. I mean, I played 13 years, and nobody really talks about the other 12. It's really about 1969. But in putting in proper perspective, all the things that I've done in my life, like write 3 books and be on all these shows and have a dog named after me on Everybody Loves Raymond, that great sitcom that's on all the time, that wouldn't have happened if I would have been with another team. And I appreciate that. And I think the other thing I try to emphasize to people that I was very lucky to play with and against this greatest conglomerate of players in the history of the game in the 60s and early 70s that came up with Cincinnati with Pete Rose and Johnny Bench and Frank Robinson, and then got traded to the Mets and played against all the great players from Mays to Aaron to Clemente to Stargell McCovey and all the great pitchers. So for me, I've got no complaints. I'm just thankful that I was part of that team, and I have wonderful people like yourself who will talk to me about it and remember it themselves, even though they might not have been around. They know about that team, and so it's very, very special. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. And I hope I can make people smile a little bit when they get this book, and kind of just get a little laugh out of it, and understand that we're all human and we all have ups and downs and everything, but to me, to be part of that team is always going to be very, very special.
I'm glad you brought up the era, because that's where I was going next to connect it to today's game, because the pitching in your time, I mean, come on. Marichal and Gibson and Seaver and you go on and on and on, right? Yet today we've never had more conditioning, more strength, more personal chefs, more. I mean, and these guys don't even pitch more than 3, 4, 5 innings. And we've got 7 million Tommy John injuries and all these arm problems and whip and analytics and all this stuff. And there's not guys who are going deep into games. For a guy who had to face guys 2, 3, 4 times over, the best of the best in baseball history, doesn't this drive you a little crazy about the game today? The pitching part has got to drive you nuts.
Well, you're exactly right. The game itself has changed. Like many things in life changes, but it's hard to explain. I'm not sure I understand all these sabermetrics and all these reasons why pitchers can't go deeper into the game. It's hard to me explain. The other thing I don't like about the game is always going to be great. It's always going to be the baseball is always going to have a wonderful part of my life, but I don't like all the strikeouts. The game now is about home runs and RBIs. I think what happens is the fans get cheated because they sit back and wait for the big inning. And I think, to me, I like small ball. I mean, if I was playing now, I'd love to be a DH. But to me, having fans get involved, why is he bunting? Why is he hitting running? Why is he doing this?
Right.
Well, they don't do that anymore. It's basically sit back and wait for the big inning. I can't explain the reasons why pitchers don't pitch more and all these injuries. It's really kind of a phenomenon to me that all these injuries are happening. But you're right. I tell people before San Diego came into the league in 1969, you go on a West Coast trip, you'd start in St. Louis and you get Bob Gibson and Steve Carlton, and I forget who the third starter was. And you go to LA and you get Koufax, Drysdale, Sutton, and Claude Osteen. Then you go to San Francisco and you get Marichal, Perry, and Mike McCormick, who was winning Cy Young awards. So I mean, that was the road trip, and so
Yeah.
But it you know, it made you a better player because every game was a challenge. And all these guys have great arms now. They're better conditioned. They're you're right. They have all these things going on for them, the chefs and whatever they might be. But I can't explain but I just am thankful that I had an opportunity to play in that era against the great players like Mays and Aaron and Clemente and all those great hitters and the pitchers. And that was mostly just the National League. And so for me, I have no regrets. I was lucky to be part of it, but more importantly, I was part of that 69 team that really kind of keeps my name out there, and very lucky to have been part of that, and very, very special time in my life. And again, I'm thankful for wonderful people like yourself who remember it and want to talk about it.
Final 30 seconds or so, can you just tell people what you hope they say about the book when they get done reading it? And by the way, it's out right now, just freshly on the shelves.
Well, again, I hope they just get a laugh out of a smile and understand that, once the games were over and once we got back to the hotel or off the field, that we were just trying to live our lives and have some fun and do some things. And I just hope they get a little smile out of it. I think that's really my goal, to make people smile and remember the 69 team, which is not difficult because people have heard about it, even if they weren't fans of that team. But that's really my goal, to just make people smile a little bit.
Baseball great, Miracle Mets legend, Art Shamsky. Of course, his new book is out right now, Mets Stories I Tell My Friends. Major platforms online, your neighborhood bookstores, and of course at artshamsky.com. Go pick it up. It's a great time to read it, right, with the baseball season coming up. And obviously Met fans, baseball fans, sports fans across the board. And we thank Stanley Law Offices and Burn Dairy for bringing you this interview. Art Shamsky, thank you a million. I'll see you soon, hopefully in Cooperstown, okay?
All right, Mike. Thanks so much.